Welcome to another episode of the Filmosophers Movie Talk Show. I'm Chris Bush.
And I'm Dean Slider.
On the Filmosophers, we talk about movies and have filmosophical discussions. And today we are tickled to have my colleague and cinematic cosmic investigator, Dean, do an unpublished edition of our Cinema Nirvana series, focusing this time on Hitchcock's classic 1959 film North by Northwest, starring Cary Grant, Eva Marie Saint, and James Mason. Dean, share with our listeners a reminder of the Cinema Nirvana approach to film watching.
Yes, the cinema nirvana approach is something that happened by accident when I kept walking out of movies at the end of films with my then wife, Maggie, and I would start jabbering on and on about all the connections I was seeing between the movies and the enlightenment path. And finally, just to get me to stop yakking, she said, "Dean, why don't you write this stuff down?" And so that wound up as this book, Cinema Nirvana, Enlightenment Lessons from the Movies, where I made a point to not write about any movies that are overtly about enlightenment or spirituality. So I take films like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Jaws, The Godfather, and show how they can all be unpacked as revealing the essential enlightenment quality of life. Why? Because it's everywhere. If it is what it's supposed to be, it's got to be everywhere, whether the artists or the filmmakers intend it to be there or not. So
we find it in the East, we find it in the South.
We find it in the North by Northwest.
Beautiful.
Yeah, boy.
So this will be fun. So let me mention too to our viewers that this is not a spoiler-free episode. So if you've not seen North by Northwest, hard to believe anyone watching this show has not seen North by Northwest. By all means, run, do not walk to your nearest streaming service and watch this incredible movie. I'll just quickly tell the setup. Cary Grant plays a New York advertising executive who, through a case of mistaken identity, he's mistaken for a CIA government agent. And he's chased by a group of foreign spies led by James Mason and Martin Landau. And he meets a young woman played by Eva Marie Saint by happenstance? We'll find out. But he finds her motives troubling. And of course, the movie is famous for so many classic sequences, including the famous scene where Cary Grant is chased by a crop duster in the South Dakota farmlands, and then ultimately where he and Eva Marie Saint are chased over the faces of the presidents on Mount Rushmore. And I'll just mention, one thing I thought was cute. I remember having seen this, Dean, but saw it again online. Many times when scripts are being printed and circulated for actors' reads and early reviews, they'll come up with a title. We haven't found the final title of the movie. And Hitchcock's original title for this movie was The Man in Lincoln's Nose.
Yep. I think going with North by Northwest was a wise move.
It survived a couple of different title options, but that was the final. Let's share for a little bit about just our impressions of the movie from a non-cinema nirvana and filmosophical viewpoint.
Mm-hmm. It's great. It's, rewatching it the other night, I was so impressed. I said, boy, this is just a perfect film. The plot takes off about 7 minutes in. We're introduced to the Cary Grant character. Here's Cary Grant doing what he does best, which is being suave and dictating notes to his ex-wives, to his secretary as he takes a cab to have drinks with someone in a hotel lobby restaurant. Everything's very elegant. Everything's fine. And about maybe 7 minutes in, bam, he's mistaken for George Kaplan, the this American spy, and he's abducted by the bad guys, and then we're off to the races, and it's just beat after beat after beat. The pace of it never lets up, and everything is just it's a complicated plot, but it's always clear and it's always fun. The dialogue, particularly the sparkling, flirtatious dialogue between Cary Grant and Eva Marie Saint, is just it's just great. It's just, if there were no Dharma implications at all to this film, it would still be one of my very favorites.
It is my favorite Hitchcock movie, and of course I have many movies that we all know that of which we're very fond: Vertigo, Psycho, Rear Window, um, The Lady Vanishes, Strangers on a Train. But this is my favorite. Hitchcock borrows from tropes he's used in previous films. Um, in Saboteur, the villain played by actor Norman Lloyd, who actually only passed away a few years ago, over 100 years old.
Yeah.
He slips from the Statue of Liberty.
Right. By the way, I met Norman Lloyd a few years before he died. He was 90 something. I met him at a party here in LA, and he was wonderful.
Oh,
Sweet,
nice.
sweet, sweet guy. And people were just it was like he was sitting in a chair, an easy chair, and almost holding court, but in a very gracious way. Everyone wanted to cluster around him and hear his stories. Because, he goes
Beautiful.
back to Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater, and
Oh,
it was
oh,
great.
films from the 30s, and yeah. So anyway, he played the villain in Saboteur. The finale is a breathtaking chase scene on the Statue of Liberty. Well, now we're talking about Mount Rushmore.
Right.
Hitchcock has used the theme of mistaken identity in previous films. Um, he's used, of course, the mysterious, conflicted woman, and as we all know, he had a thing for icy blondes,
Right.
right?
Right.
With Eva Marie Saint in this film, but Kim Novak in Vertigo, Janet Leigh in Psycho, Grace Kelly in To Catch a Thief, um,
And Rear Window, where
and
she
Rear Window.
a goddess.
Marnie,
Yes. Tippi Hedren
Tippi Hedren later
in,
on,
in The
right?
Birds.
The Birds and
Yeah.
Marnie.
Yeah.
Um, so Eva Marie Saint is our ingenue in this one, and she's she's enticing,
Hmm.
fabulous.
Hmm.
And I will shout out to one of my favorite character actors, James Mason, who plays the antagonist Philip Von Dam.
Yes.
Philip Von Dam, his assistant, played by Martin Landau,
Hmm. Yep.
Leonard.
Yeah.
And I was reading online a little more than I'd read before how Martin Landau played the character subtly, not
Yes.
overtly, but played it as played the character as gay
Yes.
because he wanted to convey the impression that this assistant, this
Hmm.
hired gun, Leonard, had more at stake than just this professional job of defending the boss. That he, in fact, was in love with his boss and jealous of the woman in whom James Mason put his faith.
Hmm.
And but it was subtle, and of
Yeah.
course, it escaped the censors.
Yeah.
But Ernest Lehman did sneak in one line in the film, later in the film,
Yes.
where Leonard is talking to James Mason about an insight he's had, and James Mason is questioning him, and Martin Landau says, "Call it women's intuition."
Call it women's. Yes. And then a few lines later, when Van Damme, the James Mason character, when Leonard tells him that Eva Marie Saint is betraying you, uh, uh, James Mason replies, "Why, Leonard? I believe you're jealous."
Yeah.
So it's clearly in there.
Yeah, but there's some great dynamics going on.
Yeah.
The budding love affair between Cary Grant and Eva Marie Saint is just it's just fantastic. And like you say, the dialogue, particularly the dialogue uh, on the train, where they're both captive on a train for a long trip. It's just sparkling. And this is dialogue screenplay written by Ernest Lehman, wonderful, wonderful screenwriter who also did screenwriting for films like West Side Story, Sabrina, The Sweet Smell of Success, Somebody Up There Likes Me. Just his best,
Hmm.
absolutely his best. And Cary Grant delivers his lines with such that Cary Grant urbane, sly, suave delivery that's
Hmm.
just it's like honey.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, if Cary Grant had not existed, it would have been necessary to invent him.
Yeah.
You know, someone had to be that just archetype of suave.
I read that Hitchcock described the film in advance of its being made to Jimmy Stewart,
Yeah.
who had appeared in maybe perhaps more than one Hitchcock film. Man Who Knew Too Much, perhaps others. Well,
Yeah.
certainly Rear
Yeah.
Window by that point.
Right.
And Stewart was so taken by the he begged Hitchcock for the movie, but Hitchcock wanted Cary Grant. He didn't want Jimmy Stewart for the role. He thought Stewart might be a little too old, although Cary Grant was 55 at the time, playing a much younger man. And so what Hitchcock did was he sidelined the project till he knew that Jimmy Stewart had been signed and obligated to star in Otto Preminger's Anatomy of a Murder.
Right.
And as soon as that happened, he made the offer to Jimmy Stewart, knowing he couldn't accept.
You're right. 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 Right.
He was a sly one.
Yep. Yep. But I think you needed Cary Grant in the role. And here I'm starting to slide now into unpacking this thing in Dharma terms a bit. I believe you needed Cary Grant in that role because you needed the world's handsomest face.
Mm.
And this is a film, as I see it, largely about faces and what is behind faces, which, from a Dharma point of view, is there's kind of nothing behind the faces. There's kind of a lot of empty space here. There is not. It turns out that there is not a an individual, finite, concrete, solid self. There's not the we presume most people go through life presuming, well, I'm this thing. It's called Dean. It goes from here to here, and but the more we look into it, when we look into it through meditation and through contemplation, and try to pinpoint where is this Dean thing, where is this limited thing, it keeps sort of it becomes very elusive. It's like looking at a wave and saying, okay, I'm a wave and I just exist as this wave, and Chris over here is this wave, and everything else are all these different waves, and they all have their separate identity. But the closer you look into it, the more it just turns out, no, there's actually only one thing here. There's this ocean, of which all the waves are various expressions. Now, what we see at the outset of the film is the Cary Grant character completely confident, completely he's dictating the notes to his secretary. He's just moving through, New York City is just that's his playground. He knows exactly what he's doing. He is busy being Roger Thornhill, and he's great about it. There is nothing in his world to challenge that. Okay? This is what's called the ego. Not necessarily egotism, arrogance, just investment in the belief that you are a separate self, a separate identity with a name, and unlike, as Walt Whitman says in Song of Myself, I'm not contained between my hat and my boots. We think we're contained. We're right here. We know what we are. We know what we're doing. That starts to be shaken when he is mistaken in the hotel for this mysterious character George Kaplan, and who is the CIA or FBI agent. It's always left a little bit vague. One of the characters says CIA, FBI, we're all in the same alphabet soup. So everyone starts calling him Kaplan. It's the first questioning of his identity, and as the film goes on, as he needs to get into George Kaplan's hotel room to investigate who he is, he identifies himself to the hotel personnel as George Kaplan. He starts taking on that name. The my favorite hint about the situation is his middle initial when Eve, the Eva Marie Saint character, sees his monogram on his book of matches. It's his initials. He's Roger Thornhill. It's R-O-T, rot. And she asks, well, what does the O stand for? And he says, nothing. And that's it. There's never any, well, that was just a joke. It's really Oliver or Oscar or something. No, the O stands for nothing. We're nothing in the middle. Okay. On the front were these faces, but in the middle, at the core, we're something open. We're something empty. Okay. Buddhists tend to use more language like emptiness, shunyata. Hindus use more language like Brahman, the infinite. But either way, so we can say nothing or we can say no thing. There is no object. There's no chunk of stuff, which is what we are. We're nothing in the middle. And I think that most people suspect that. I think most people have an intuition that I'm not really this thing that I'm walking around being that I'm playing so confidently, this role. But it terrifies them. This is where we get the famous, existential dread, we don't want to look into the void. We have to keep busy. I remember visiting with an aunt of my wife's, and we said, "Well, how are you doing?" And she said, "Well, just trying to keep busy, like all of us." And that was so interesting. It's like we must keep busy at all costs. We must have frantic activity at all costs. We must rush more. And hence, the final showdown is going to be on Mount Rushmore. That's where we're going to really question that whole way of being. The it turns out, we find out about a quarter of a third of the way through the film that George Kaplan, the spy for whom he has been mistaken, does not exist. It's a made-up identity, which the CIA or FBI, whoever, headed up by the wonderful character actor Leo G. Carroll as, quote, the professor, kind of an Alan Dulles type or something. For people of a certain age will know who Alan Dulles was. And when he's in a meeting with his people and they call his attention to the fact that poor Roger Thornhill has gotten mistaken for Kaplan, the guy that doesn't exist, they say, well, what do we do about Thornhill? And he says, nothing. Because they need to have him, now that he has stepped into this false role, right? He has stepped into this, someone who is truly nobody. George Kaplan does not exist. And now he is this non-existent character for all intents and purposes. But so they need him to keep doing that, to keep distracting the foreign bad guys from their real agent. So what are we going to do about Thornhill? He says nothing, right? Because he's nobody. You do nothing about nobody. The the two big showdowns. Of course, the final one is on Mount Rushmore. The one before that is the crop duster scene, the famous crop duster scene, which, by the way, uh, was uh, the two kind of germ ideas that led Hitchcock and Lehman to develop this story. One was, okay, we got to have a chase scene on Mount Rushmore. They had that before they had anything else. And then the other thing was Hitchcock wanted to have a scene where the hero is chased by a tornado. And he was meeting in a big conference room, with a big conference table, just him and Ernest Lehman. Uh, and Hitchcock, as usual, was collaborating on the scripts, but he never took writing credit, which I think was very generous. And Ernest Lehman was trying to convince him, wait, it doesn't make sense. How can you be chased by a tornado? And they started like working this out, play acting it. And one of them in the conference room, one of them would be the tornado, and the other would be the hero. And I just love picturing Hitchcock chasing poor Ernest Lehman around the room as a tornado, which at some point in that meeting, the tornado evolved into a crop duster. So Roger Thornhill / Cary Grant is instructed to go to this, take the bus to this particular place where he's going to meet Kaplan. It's this forlorn country road. Famously and deliberately, it's the opposite of where scary scenes usually take place in movies. Right? It's always in a dark alley. It's always at night. It's always in the crowded city, all the noir cliches. And Hitchcock, acutely aware of all those noir cliches at that point, said, let's do the opposite. Let's put him out in the open in a vast field under brilliant sunlight with no buildings, nothing there, and make that terrifying, which they brilliantly do with the crop duster. But first, building suspense. Right? Hitchcock was always billed as the master of suspense. Okay? Now, what is suspense? Suspense is built on expectation. What's going to happen in the next moment? What's going to happen in the next moment? If one thing happens and one kind of thing happens in the next moment, and our hero with whom we have identified, we have, interestingly enough, as an audience member, to some degree, taken on his identity empathetically. Otherwise, his fate wouldn't matter to us. One of the reasons why movies are shown in darkened rooms. You have to make the screen brighter, but also so you lose awareness of your own body and it's easier to identify with the guy on the screen. So here we are, now identified with the hero. If things go this way, if the moment turns out okay for him, we're relieved, life is okay. If things turn out this way, things go badly for him, then life is not okay. We're devastated. So our sense of the okayness of life is invested in the outcome in a particular outcome in a moment outside of the present. Now, I find it interesting to contrast that with what happens in meditation. Right? Because in meditation, what we discover is that it's always only the present, and that the future only exists for us as a bunch of expectations, hopeful expectations or expectations of dread. But in either way, what they are is thoughts. We don't experience the past either. What we experience is thoughts, a particular subset of thoughts that we call memories. What we call the future is a subset of memories that we call expectation. And we get usually we have our whole sense of the okayness of life invested in which of those outcomes, whether the desired outcome is one that comes to fruition. What happens in meditation is, no, for now, that's all just thoughts, and I just be with whatever is going on right now, disengaging from all my attempts to change it into anything else. And then the more that happens, the more we sink into just the beingness of the present moment, and the more it dawns on us of, oh, there is an infinite okayness for no reason. There's an infinite okayness of just being that's not predicated on any kind of outcome. So I just find it fascinating that Hitchcock, in a way, his whole, what he's the master of is the kind of the inverse of meditation. He in a way, in that inverse way, he understands very deeply the human psyche, and by seeing kind of the opposite of what happens in meditation, the inverse of it. So, in any case, so Roger Thornhill, Cary Grant, waiting to meet Kaplan, who, by the way, what is Kaplan's name? Interesting that Kaplan, which is stereotypically a Jewish name, and Thornhill is kind of he is most definitely a suave Gentile in his world of cocktails and Madison Avenue and so forth. So already that name Kaplan, it's the other, it's something outside of his comfort zone. But also, what is the name Kaplan comes from? Kop, head, faces. The way he gets off the train when the cops are looking for him is he gets off disguised as a red cap. He wears a red cap, and then just having a different cap, a different head, a different face, now you're lost in the sea of all the other interchangeable caps. Right? So waiting to meet Kaplan, and what he meets is no one. What he meets is the crop duster coming, which in its earlier iteration was a tornado coming out of the sky. And there is an echo there of the book of Job. Right? Job undergoes all of his trials and tribulations, as Roger Thornhill has been. Roger's been now out of his comfort zone, climbing the thorny hill. And Job, after all these horrible things happened to him, finally, lifts his face to the sky and says, why? Why is all this happening? And then God speaks to him out of the whirlwind. It's a voice out of the whirlwind, right? When you've had enough tribulation, when you've had enough challenges to who you thought you were and how you thought things were supposed to go, you're finally left face to face with, in Job's case, the voice out of the whirlwind gives the longest soliloquy in the entire Bible, and says, basically, where were you when I laid the foundations of the universe? What do you know? Can you enumerate all the hairs on all the animals in the world? Basically just saying your picture is way too small for you to be questioning, why is all this happening to me? In other words, you're stuck in the small perspective of a person, of a separate self, of an ego. And once God gives Job that expanded perspective, he's ready to say, okay, I'll go along with the program here, because it's not useful to sit and gripe about everything happening to poor me when I'm just a tiny part of the picture. In Thornhill's case, he has the confrontation with the tornado, now transmogrified into the crop duster, which the first introduction to the fact that something may be amiss is when a local kind of farmer guy that's standing at the bus stop with him looks over at it and says, "That's funny. That he's dusting that crop duster is dusting crops where there ain't no crops." Right? Again, the emptiness of action. We're doing all these actions, but there's a kind of emptiness to it. He's confronting that, the emptiness of his action. And then once he survives that encounter, he's really he's pushed into the final big chase down Mount Rushmore. The Mount Rushmore is the ultimate great big faces, right? It's the biggest heads around. Interesting. We say, what's on the dollar bill? We say, well, it's a picture of George Washington, but it's not. It's a picture of George Washington's face. Right? We don't get George Washington's elbow. We don't get George Washington's knees. It's George Washington's face. We identify with faces, with heads. When we identify as a person, as a small self, as some wave separated out from the ocean of beingness, and then we concentrate that further. We say, we are this head, we are this face. So the final confrontation with the bad guys trying to kill them, it's like our final survival, whether we're going to survive, whether we're going to flourish. It's as if that question turns on whether we can correctly resolve this question of, are we just egos with faces on them? And the big showdown comes when, the wonderful, just quintessential Hitchcockian suspenseful scene. Cary Grant's hanging onto the edge of the cliff with one hand, with the other hand, Eva Marie Saint's hanging on to him. And then here comes the jealous, as you've mentioned, covertly homosexual, jealous, bad guy, Martin Landau, and Cary Grant looks up at him and says, "Help me." And Martin Landau walks over and starts grinding his shoe on top of Cary Grant's hand. Oh my God, that's just so cinematically brilliant. I saw this film when it first came out. I was 9 or 10 years old. And man, oh man, did I remember that moment. But that's where the resolution happens. We'll leave it to the viewers to see the film and get the big question throughout the film, the other big question has been, can you trust the woman? Can you trust interesting that the actress is Eva Marie Saint. They didn't go far for her character's name. They called her Eve, which makes her the temptress, makes her the first woman, the primal woman, and all the associations of that. Gee, is getting involved with the woman here? Is this a good thing? Are we going to be able to? Or is this going to get us in trouble? Is this going to get us kicked out of the garden? In the case of this film, can I trust her? Is she, as she keeps trying to lure me to bed, and then apparently not? And is she playing these games? Is she on the good side or on the bad side? And turns out she's on the good side. It turns out that he needs to trust her. And people, especially if you don't, well, let me put it this way. If you practice meditation, you have a way of sitting down every day, closing your eyes, and opening to that which is bigger than yourself, than your small, what you thought was the self, opening to the capital S self, or to the cosmic emptiness, to the ocean, whatever we want to call it. You have a way of doing that with great regularity. If you don't meditate, or even if you do, there's other places in life where you get an opportunity to do that, to go beyond the smallness of small s self. And the biggest one for most people is in relationship. This is one of the reasons why marriage, if you're lucky, if it goes right, if you use it intelligently and sensitively, marriage is such a great part of, I think, of the path of awakening, because there's always someone around to tell you you're wrong. There's always someone around for you to have to challenge the way you would do things if you were just on your own. To challenge your. I mean, Yafa and I, my wife and I, we've got a running thing. We can't agree on what color things are. You know, a pair of socks, I say they're blue, she says they're black, or vice versa. I don't know. It's from the point of view of this little head here, this Dean head, it's clear, it's obvious that they're blue. But now here's marriage, here's the wife, here's this other head that if I want to have a happy life, I got to get along with her. And she says, no, it's another color. So you're constantly being forced to relax your grip on your small individual perspective and find something bigger. And there's the wonderful, since we're giving all the spoilers here, at the very end of the film, there's the wonderful moment where he's trying to pull her up onto the cliff, and she says, "Come on!" And then it dissolves into, now everything's turned out fine, and they're back on the train. Now it's their honeymoon. He says, "Come on, Mrs. Thornhill," and he's pulling her up into the upper berth where they're finally gonna consummate the relationship, and everything's happily ever after. And then we cut to the final shot of the film,
Suggestive.
the train going through the tunnel. Now, this is the last thing I'm going to say, because I've been yakking away. Hitchcock was always very skeptical of symbol hunting. He would probably hate this whole conversation. He would hate my whole monologue here. Fine. He's not around to argue. But once, when he was being interviewed by Francois Truffaut, Truffaut asked him, "Well, people keep finding all these symbols in your films. Are there symbols in your films?" And Hitchcock said no. And he said, "Well, at the end of North by Northwest, when the train," right? I mean, it's such an embarrassingly Freudian thing. He says, "At the end of North by Northwest, when the train goes into the tunnel, but don't tell anyone."
Well, that's true, Dean. But I would say what was brought to mind also is a scene in To Catch a Thief, where Cary Grant is making love to Grace Kelly, and the point of view keeps shifting to the fireworks exploding over the Riviera, which certainly was suggestive.
Yeah.
Of the romantic moment. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was and you're right, that transition scene, that edit of him trying to lift her up from peril, from death into, and then he says, "Come along, Mrs. Thornhill."
Right.
And the edit is so skillful where it just dissolves to him lifting her up by the hand
Yeah.
into the upper berth.
Yeah.
It gets me every time.
Yeah.
That thing.
Great.
Now, I was thinking while we were talking, by the way, this is so brilliant. Thank you. These are insights I never would have thought of a million years, but they're all right on. Just how just reflecting too on the arc of the Cary Grant's evolution. And it really is kind of the hero's journey. Huh?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He starts out, as you say, bold and confident, this fast talking, high achieving Madison Avenue advertising executive, thrust into a situation of great uncertainty. And he's confused. And in the beginning, he's outraged and annoyed at what's happening, but realizes soon that
he's abducted, and he complains. He says, "But wait, I've got theater tickets." He's still trying to hold on to the smallness, the triviality of his regular life.
You can't be doing this.
Right.
I've got theater tickets. But then soon that outrage and that confusion turns into realization of peril.
Yeah.
and becomes survival.
Yeah.
But he's very skillful too at
Yeah.
his survival.
Yes.
And of course, he has help along the way.
Yes.
But there's one other another famous scene of confrontation in the auction house
Yeah. Boy, that's great.
where he's sitting in the auction house trying to find cover. It's where he has realized that Eva Marie Saint is not the innocent, attractive woman he thought he met on chance encounter, but in fact, she is allied with the people that are trying to kill him.
Yeah.
And he looks around and sees that the exits to the auction house are are covered. He can't escape,
Yeah.
and he devises a trick
Hmm.
to extract himself,
Yeah.
act like a drunken fool, so that they call the police and the police
Yeah.
can save him.
Make
So he's
crazy.
fast.
Yeah.
He is fast thinking. He thinks on his feet. His his peril doesn't end, but he discovers that the woman he's attracted to is not to be trusted, in fact. But he still can't get away from her.
Until he finds out at the next layer that actually she is to be trusted.
Well, I'm not sure about that. I think where as I recall, and I have to watch again, where he surrenders to actually being George Kaplan
Yeah.
and assuming that role, assuming that face and that identity is when he finds out that his damsel is in distress.
Mhm. Yeah.
When the professor reveals to him that if he does not,
That she's working for us. She's working for
he's
the good
working for
guys.
us, and if you don't take on this role
Yeah.
wholeheartedly, through resolution,
Yeah.
she may in fact get
He
killed.
says George Kaplan doesn't exist, but you've got to go on being him for another 24 hours.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And
And
that's
he
and that
does.
and that's and the thing is that's us. We discover that we're no one. We discover that we're not. But then having done that, we go on playing our roles.
Well, this is it, and I
But
think
we play the roles with more grace, with more effectiveness, not less. That people think the cliche of the meditators, oh, we just become complacent and useless and sitting in a cave somewhere and drooling. But in fact, the real archetype of the meditator, as we know, is Arjuna the warrior in the Bhagavad Gita. He gets the teachings to established in infinite beingness, go forth and into your battle. And he's really
and
in that sense, Roger Thornhill is an Arjuna character.
yeah, and all the world's a stage,
Yeah, he's
and all the
also
men and women merely players.
yes, he's all and speaking of Shakespeare, he's also very much Hamlet. In fact, in that where he has to reluctantly he decides he needs to take action to set things right, to get rid of the rot. See, the thing is, you're no one in the middle, but if you just sit and don't act appropriately from that, then you rot. Then there's something is rotten in the state of Denmark. But then when he takes interesting in that auction scene, he's basically acting crazy, which is what Hamlet does throughout the play in order
Yeah,
to and in fact the title North by Northwest, apparently on a literal level they take Northwest Airlines at one point to travel north, so I guess that's where it comes from, but it also is an echo of the line from Hamlet, where he discloses to someone, I think to Polonius, he says something like, I am mad, but northwest. When the wind is from the south, I know a hawk from a handsaw, or something like that.
yeah.
Though this be madness, yet there's method in it.
And I think that while the Thornhill character has not sought this fate, has not
Mhm.
sought this destiny,
Yeah,
he finds purpose in it
yeah,
because as the advertising executive, he's all about glib and surface and polish and money and position, and that's all taken away. But
yeah.
he finds something more.
Yeah, and as the glib New York advertising executive Roger Thornhill, he's been married and divorced multiple times. And I know one of your favorite lines and one of my favorite lines from the film is when Eva Marie Saint is coming on to him in a very overtly sexual way in the train, and he says, "How does a girl like you get to be a girl like you?" And she says, "Men like you."
Yeah,
And
yeah, really
it's
brilliant.
ooh, it's so brilliant, and it's such an indictment. Um, and it's through that transformation that he undergoes in the course of the film that we know this is going to be the real marriage. This is going to be he's found a deeper identity from I frankly I don't know how anyone who doesn't meditate manages to stay married. Right? If you don't know how to melt into that which transcends my personality with all its quirks and her personality with all its quirks, I don't know how anyone manages to, because otherwise, living together can be that can be a real
So a
challenge.
lot of people do, and
Yeah.
it's an unconscious act
Yeah.
as opposed to a conscious act
Yes. Yes. Yes.
of relationship.
One way or
I think
another,
too.
you find that bigger something. Yeah.
I think too. I think of in in the in the state of what we call enlightenment or freedom. You can come to realize that even though perhaps unconsciously before the awareness dawns, you've really been playing your part perfectly.
Yeah.
You've been playing your part with conviction, and
Yeah.
you've been really playing it perfectly.
Yeah.
And now you can continue to play that part in freedom.
In freedom.
And it become even more delightful
Yeah. Yeah.
that you've been cast in this role. Because Dean, you get to play Dean in this life.
Yeah.
And Yaffa gets to play Yaffa. And isn't that so
Yeah.
amazing and delightful?
It is.
And no one's better at playing Dean than you are.
Yeah. Perfectly cast. Right on the money. Right.
And that's with Cary Grant and James Mason and even Murray Saint.
Yes, yes. But the freedom lies in finding out that even as you're playing a role. Oh, and that's one of the great lines in the film is when Van Damme, the James Mason character, says to Thornhill, "You overplay your various roles."
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Right? There it is.
Yeah.
There it is. There it is. Um, so the great discovery is that even as we go on being our particular character, the Dean character or the Chris character in this movie, we're no longer identified with that. That's the key, is identification, is that we discover we are the the pure white screen, the blank open white screen. That's behind the whole movie, which makes the movie possible. That's the O in the middle of Roger O. Thornhill. That's the nothing that makes all this something possible, and which is our ultimate identity. All the great wisdom traditions, one way or another, say that, and it's directly experientially discoverable through processes like meditation.
But I think of it too as and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong on this, but it feels that the experience is that with a shift in perspective, you can experience yourself as wave or ocean or wave and ocean when the ancient wise ones say, you're not the body. I think it's that you're not the body alone,
Hmm.
and you don't want to sacrifice your ocean identity, your oceanness,
Yeah,
strictly for the waveness.
right.
But in realizing your oceanness, you don't. There's still what they say, man, the Lesha Vidya, the vestige
Hmm.
of of personality
Hmm.
of living out your life in this form.
Yeah, it still goes on and it's perfectly appropriate. I mean, to me, I know, we shared a teacher many years ago who kept bringing us back to Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 48. established in being, perform action. Yogastha kuru karmani. And man, that's one. That's if I ever get a tattoo, I think that'll be it, because that really says it all. It's you do both. It's the 200% of life. It's living the absolute, living the expressed as the relative. And there's a perfect appropriateness to that. But the thing is, as you continue to, because most people are just living the small, the relative, identity, the face, and they think that's all there is, it can, really easily lead to despair and to depression and to it's because everyone's looking for that fullness, and consciously or probably in most cases unconsciously. Like, it can't be just this. And if we think I'm just this, we're always looking for something to fulfill me. Maybe this drink will do it. Maybe this little sexual dalliance will do it.Maybe this drug will do it. Something. When we're experiencing, no, established in boundless beingness, I'm this, then we continue the same kind of actions, but they're no longer in the context of a search for fulfillment. They become expressions of fulfillment, and that changes everything. From the outside, we look the same, except maybe we look a little. If people pay attention, they'll see we're happier than we used to be, more relaxed about things than we have to be. But maybe other people are too caught up in their own desperation to notice that there's a few people around who aren't caught up in that, and that's all the difference. And to me, all the great films, the great works of art, the great epics, great paintings, are all, one way or another, are going to reflect that reality, because that's a part of their greatness. That's why they continue to resonate for people in all over the world, all different centuries. There's something about it that can't define. That's just, this is the stuff. This is the juice. This is what we've been looking for.
And I think, to put the bow on the top of our conversation about North by Northwest, to say that ultimately it's love that saves us.
Yeah. No, love is, that love is the way. And, that's kind of what we were saying before in the context of the honeymoon scene in the upper berth of the train at the end. That's the love is the getting beyond your small s self, is the breaking out of that little shell. So
Beautiful.
Thanks for whoever invented that thing. Thanks, boss.
Good thinking. Nice idea.
Yeah.
That's a keeper.
Yep.
Well, Dean, this is delightful, my friend. Thank you so much. Let's do it again.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us on the Filmosophers Movie Talk Show. Please like and share this video, and remember to subscribe to our channel to stay up to date on our newest episodes.